Well, it's that time of year again. A time when ghosts and zombies rise up, and I am forced to go on a single Snek crusade, destroying them all with little more than a whip and whatever I find along the way. Yeah, that sounds right to me. Join me for a closer, Halloween-themed look. Greetings everyone, this is the Hipster Snek. For this Halloween Snek Suite, we'll be looking at the sorely underrated Castlevania Lament of Innocence for the PS2. This should come as no surprise, as I admitted to loving the series several times over the past year now, and also mentioned it in passing last Halloween. Debuting in North America in 2003, and was the third 3D Castlevania game, and the first good 3D Castlevania game. Yeah, I personally theorize that a good part of the reason this game ended up so overlooked was largely in part to the N64 Castlevania titles going down like a lead balloon. But that's okay, this game is actually really, really good, so let's break it down. The year is 1094 AD, and Baron Leon Belmont and his closest friend, Matthias Kronkfist, had just returned from a war, only for tragedy to befall them both. First, Matthias' wife perishes, and Matthias himself falls bedridden in grief. Because things weren't bad enough already, Matthias then informs Leon that his beloved and betrothed Sarah has been kidnapped by a vampire named Walter and taken to a castle enshrouded by a never-ending night. However, to go after her means abandoning his station. Leon leaves behind his title and even his sword as he travels into the forest. Lucky for him, however, one Ronaldo Gandolfi, yes, seriously, roll with it, is there to greet him on the castle grounds. Bearing a grudge against Walter as well, Gandolfi is all too eager to arm Leon with a gauntlet, both as a shield and as means to utilize magic for himself, and the Whip of Alchemy. Thus, Leon storms the castle enshrined in darkness to hope of destroying the evil that lurks inside and bringing peace and justice to the world anew. And for starters, this game just looks great. Even as PS2 titles go, it's sharp. While the atmosphere is visibly dark and suitably gothic for the overall tone of the game, it probably could have used a bit more in-game lighting at parts, and I don't mean the whippable candle holders. That one complaint aside, I love the stylized monsters, and even Leon himself sports a sharp red and white color scheme that makes him pop on screen. The animations are smooth and clean. Just running around and exploring is satisfying, and each zone has its own distinctive theme laced throughout. The bosses are huge, larger-than-life encounters, giving a sort of David vs. Goliath feel to each. Just wonderful. And soundtrack-wise, this game is of course amazing. It's a Castlevania game, of course it has a great soundtrack. With dark, ambient tracks like Cursed Memories, the almost jazz-inspired Traces of Malevolent Souls, to the high-flying Garden Forgotten by Time. Every song sets the mood perfectly, every time. Interesting point of trivia, Lament of Innocence actually has very few callbacks to older Castlevania songs. Most of the soundtrack, top-down, is all original, and I salute the game for taking that extra step to establish itself not only as a prequel in the story-based sense, but also in the aesthetic sense. And the boss tracks are showstoppers, like the track titled Bizarre Room or Nightmare Aria, which are guaranteed winners in my book every time. Though I confess my personal favorite overall is the titular track Lament of Innocence, which also serves as Leon's character theme. The sound effects are great too. With each strike of the whip, the sub-weapons, even the monster cries are all masterfully done. The voice cast brings an A game with some familiar voices all doing their best, including Dave Wittenberg doing the voice of Leon, Crispin Freeman as Matthias, and Melissa Fawn as Sarah. Just superb all around. Mechanically, people familiar with the Metroidvania style gameplay will feel right at home here. Though, funny enough, I also sort of feel like people who prefer traditional Castlevania level progression might get a special appreciation for it as well. After clearing the prologue zone of the castle, you're offered the chance to select areas within to explore. These areas are actually self-contained and don't spill over into each other, making it not entirely dissimilar from a linear level progression found in, say, Castlevanias 3 and 4. However, within the confines of these zones, the map fills out and secrets are unlocked in similar fashion to the Metroidvania installments. Leon himself moves at a brisk pace and must chain together utilities from his whip, his gauntlet for defense, his magical items in the form of sub-weapons, powered by hearts as is tradition, and more than that. While Leon's loadout doesn't change as much as some other Metroidvania-era heroes, Leon will always have a whip of some kind, for instance. He will still get RPG-like options to power up further by way of equipment. You can have 3 accessories, a relic, an orb, an armor, and a sub-weapon equipped at any one time. And this is in part because the game won't scale based on level. Leon does not level up. So while you never grind for XP, you do have the option of hunting enemies for extra money to, say, buy consumables with. Instead, you're expected to just get better at dodging and blocking incoming attacks and using your tools to their greatest extent. Let's break down that equipment loadout a bit more now. Accessories can adjust stats and give status resistances, armor supplies, well, armor. The relic can have all sorts of secondary effects and utilizes MP to activate. The orb can change the nature of your sub-weapons, which like many Castlevanias will drop randomly from candles, and you can more or less collect whatever one you want at any time. My personal favorite is some of the variants of the cross sub-weapon, which you can make to behave as a barrier if you have the right orb for it. Speaking of, this is a feature I'm surprised is exclusive to Lament of Innocence. In old-school Castlevania titles, a boss fight always concluded with the boss dropping an orb and the Belmont in question collecting it in order to proceed. The same holds true here with the 5 main bosses and some number of secret encounters having orbs that Leon can collect. You can then equip whatever orb suits your fancy to supplement the usage of your sub-weapons and custom tailor their behavior to your playstyle. And, as said, sub-weapons are powered by hearts, making them separate entities from equipable magical relics. Combined all together, this is how you will suit Leon for every encounter and learn firsthand that you can't use items from the regular paused menu like you can in some other games. You want to use items? Well, you better get good at calling up the sub-menu in active combat and using it while you're still fighting. Leon has no opportunities to catch his breath once the action gets underway. Thankfully, as said, you have plenty of defensive options. You can block incoming damage using your gauntlet or dodge around, somewhat akin to God Hand, in order to avoid attacks. And Leon has no shortage of options to go on the offensive either. The whip has a large swath horizontally in most cases, making it a very effective tool if you're not great at aiming in a 3D space or if you have PTSD from the N64 games. This means that every battle, be it with a mundane skeleton or with a boss encounter, is fast and energetic, with lots of split-second decision-making coming up when the heat's on. It's a very fun and very satisfying feeling to send the creatures of the night back where they belong. Was there anything about the game I didn't like? Well, it is short. The game can be beaten in between 6 to 8 hours, even if you're not that great at this sort of game. This is in part because there's no artificial game time added due to grinding levels, but on the other hand, there are 2 unlockable playable characters with different game styles that will also add another 6 to 8 hours each. So it's actually a pretty robust package if you're willing to put in the time. Also, there's 1 or 2 jumping puzzles that had a little bit of an awkward camera angle. They weren't mandatory or even all that hard, just that a little more control over visibility would have been welcomed. And while the game was ported on the PlayStation Store, it only ever got as far as the PS3, with no apparent availability beyond that. And that's a real shame. Lament of Innocence is amazing and sorely underrated, even as Castlevania titles go. All told, is it worth playing today? Absolutely it is. Leon Belmont is still up and away one of the coolest members of his family, and I'm glad his story got to be told. It's an amazing game that's still super fun to play, and again, 2 additional playable characters are there to be unlocked. It's just more incentive to master the game under slightly different playing conditions and enjoy it all the more. If you can, pick this game up this Halloween and hunt the night. This has been Snek Belmont. If you liked today's episode, hit the like button so I know. Leave a comment down below telling me who your favorite Belmont is. I'd love to know. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe and bell icons too so you don't miss anything as it comes out. And for more from me, you can head over to the Tomodachi Bros channel, where we cover anime, movies, and now includes segments for tabletop games and streaming video games. But be sure to join me here each week for more obscure reviews, indie excellence, and more. And I will see you there.